In this video, I'm going to get you ready for your pre-release and first few drafts of March of the Machine, the newest expansion from Magic the Gathering. We're going to cover the mechanics, the top commons in each color, a quick guide for each of the 10 two-color archetypes, and finally, we'll run through the combat tricks to look out for when you're playing your matches. Let's jump into the mechanics. First up are battles. There will presumably be new types of battles in the future, but for now, all of the battles in this set are called sieges, and they all work the same way. We'll use Invasion of Muruganda for our example. So we pay the casting cost here, and our opponent becomes its protector. We are still the battle's controller. When declaring attackers, we can choose to attack the battle, just like a planeswalker, and our opponent can choose whether or not to block. We can also target battles with effects that deal damage to any target. When we deal damage to the battle, remove that many defense counters from it. When we defeat it by removing the last defense counter, we exile it and cast it transformed. Our next new mechanic is Backup. Backup lets us put a +1/+1 counter on any creature and then share an ability with that creature. Let's use Red Cap Heel Slasher for our example. When it enters the battlefield, since it has Backup 1, you get to put a single +1/+1 counter on a creature, including itself. If you target another creature, that creature gains first strike until end of turn. If we cast Gloomfang Mauler, we would get to put 2 +1/+1 counters on itself or another creature, and then give that creature Menace until end of turn. Our last mechanic is Incubate. Lots of cards have Incubate followed by a number tacked on as an additional effect. For example, Phyrexian Awakening. When it enters the battlefield, we incubate 4. This means we create an Incubator artifact token with 4 +1/+1 counters on it. We can then pay 2 at instant speed to transform it into a 0/0 creature, so it would be a 4/4 after it transforms. On the other hand, if we cast Eyes of Gitaxias to incubate 3 and draw a card, we would create a token with 3 +1/+1 counters, and again, we can pay 2 to transform it. With the mechanics out of the way, let's take a look at my early picks for the top commons in each color, starting with white. At number 3, Sunder the Gateway. For 1 and a white, we get a sorcery. Choose one, destroy target non-token artifact or enchantment an opponent controls, incubate 2. Or we could incubate 2, then transform an incubator token you control. So baseline a 2-mana 2/2 with tons of flexibility, which is always powerful and limited. And then if you top deck this in the late game, perhaps we just transform one of our other tokens that's maybe a little bit bigger, or maybe we have a good target that we would want to destroy instead. Number 2, Realm Breaker's Grasp. For 1 and a white, we get an enchantment aura. We can enchant an artifact or creature. Enchanted permanent can't attack or block, and its activated abilities can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. So these effects are always solid and a surefire bet for one of the top white commons. And number 1, Attentive Skywarden. For 2 and a white, we get a 2/2 Phyrexian Core with flying. Whenever Attentive Skywarden deals combat damage to a player or battle, transform up to 1 target incubator token you control. An evasive threat that flips your incubator tokens for free should give you a massive tempo advantage over your opponents that have to spend a whole 2 mana to flip theirs. And flying, I think, will be extra important in this set when we're trying to flip our battles. Let's move on to blue. Number 3, Stasis Field. For 1 and a blue, we get an enchantment aura, enchant creature. Enchanted creature has base power and toughness 0/2, has defender, and loses all other abilities. Nice cheap removal in blue. It doesn't tap the creature down like many other variations of this card, but the 1 to 2 mana discount versus those cards is nice to see. Number 2, Temporal Cleansing. For 3 and a blue, we get a sorcery with Convoke. The owner of target non-land permanent puts it into their library, second from the top or on the bottom. Another solid blue removal spell that can benefit from the Convoke discount, especially in blue-red and blue-white that generates lots of tokens. And number 1, Preening Champion. 2 and a blue for a 2/2 Bird Knight with flying. When Preening Champion enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 blue and red elemental creature token. So a 3 mana 2/2 flyer that comes with a 1/1 token is already solid, but it's especially strong in this set for a few reasons. The 1/1 token contributes to Convoke, the fact that this flies lets you attack and flip battles more easily, and it's a knight for the blue-white Knights deck. Solid rate blue creature that goes in almost any blue deck. Next up is black. So these are a bit boring, but I have to give the top 3 black commons to the removal spells in this order. Number 3, Vanquish the Weak. For 2 and a black, we get an instant, destroy target creature with power 3 or less. In at number 2, Final Flourish. For 1 and a black, we get an instant. It has kicker. Sacrifice an artifact or creature. Target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn. If this spell was kicked, that creature gets -6/-6 until end of turn. And number 1, Deadly Derision. 2 black for an instant. Destroy target creature or planeswalker. Create a treasure token. These are all solid removal spells that you'll be happy to take early. I want to give an honorable mention to Nezumi Informant. For 1 and a black, you get a 1/1. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. This looks quite powerful as a great way to generate card advantage alongside sacrifice outlets like Corrupted Conviction. 1 black for an instant. As an additional cost, sack a creature, draw 2 cards. Now let's move on to red. Number 3, Thrashing Frontliner. For 1 and a red, we get a 2/2 Phyrexian Viashino with Trample. When it attacks a battle, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Battles are super important in this set, and this lets you get a massive tempo advantage by helping you flip them faster than your opponent. And since it has Trample, this wears +1/+1 counters from backup really well. Number 2, Rawl's Reinforcements. 1 and a red for a sorcery, create 2 1/1 blue and red elemental creature tokens. Premium 2-drop for almost any red deck. It goes wide for team pump effects like Inspired Charge in red-white, contributes to Convoke in blue-red, and provides sack fodder in black-red. And number 1, Volcanic Spite. For 1 and a red, we get an instant. Volcanic Spite deals 3 damage to target creature, planeswalker, or battle. You may put a card from your hand on the bottom of your library. If you do, draw a card. Easy choice for the best red common, a powerful instant speed removal spell that also targets battles and lets you fix your draws. Slam dunk. Now let's move on to green. Number 3, Cosmic Hunger. For 1 and a green, we get an instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to another target creature, planeswalker, or battle. Your key removal spell in green at common, it's an instant, deals damage rather than fights, and can even target battles. Number 2, Portent Tracker. For 1 and a green, we get a creature Satyr Scout. It's a 1/1. Tap to untap target land. Tap, choose target battle. If an opponent protects it, remove a defense counter from it. Otherwise, put a defense counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. So this allows you to ramp stuff out early and flip your battles in the late game. Solid green creature. And number 1, Overgrown Pest. For 2 and a green, we get a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal a land or double-faced card from among them and put that card into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. This card is fantastic in multiple archetypes, digging for battles and transform creatures, or in a pinch grabbing your 4th land to make sure you continue to curve out. And since it sees 5 cards deep, it will be rare that you miss with this creature. Now, let's move on to the 10 archetypes. First up is Blue-White Knights Tribal. The signpost uncommon is Marshal of Jalfir. For white-blue, we get a 2/2 Human Knight. Other knights you control get +1/+1. Pay white-blue and tap this to tap another target creature. You want to play as many knights as you can get, like Swordsworn Cavalier and Preening Champion. Then use spells to keep your opponent off balance, like Invasion of Xyrex and Ifara's Dispersal. This deck can also dip into the Convoke strategies in blue, thanks to some of the token generation from cards like the Preening Champion and Knight of the New Coalition. Plus, the various ways to offer creatures vigilance should be strong, like Jalfir and Lancer. Attack with your creatures, then tap them on your opponent's end step to help cast a cheap Meeting of Minds to refill your hand. Speaking of, next up is Blue-Red Convoke. The signpost uncommon for this deck is Joyful Storm Sculptor. For 3 blue-red, we get a 2/3 Human Shaman. When it enters the battlefield, create 2 1/1 blue and red elemental creature tokens. Whenever you cast a spell that has Convoke, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each battle they protect. Get lots of creatures in play with Raw's Reinforcements and Preening Champion, then use the extra bodies to cast Convoke spells for cheap, like Temporal Cleansing and Shivan Branchburner. Ramosian Greatsword looks like a fun card for this deck, turning our 1/1s from Raw into 4/2 Tramplers. Next up is Blue-Black Graveyard Matters. The signpost uncommon is Halo Forger. For 1 blue-black, we get a 3/1 Fairy Rogue, has flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may pay X. When you do, you may cast target instant or sorcery card with mana value X from a graveyard without paying its mana cost. If that spell be put into a graveyard, exile it instead. Mill both players with Flitting Gorilla, Moment of Truth, and Invasion of Amonkhet. Then gain value from the graveyard with Unseal the Necropolis, and Halo Charged Skob. And when your opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, you get to turn on the premium 2-drop for this deck, Expedition Outlook, and the solid 4-drop Tenured Oilcaster. Next is a classic red-black sacrifice strategy. The signpost uncommon is Stormclaw Rager. For 1 black-red, we get a 2/2 Ogre Warrior, pay 1 and sack another creature or artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Stormclaw Rager, and draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. Aki Scrap Chomper is a solid sack outlet, while Ichor Shade grows from things dying. Most of the sack outlets allow you to sacrifice artifacts, so we want ways to generate treasure, including the fantastic removal spell, Deadly Derision, but Beamtown Beatstick should be solid in this deck as a repeatable way to generate treasure tokens. You also want creatures you'd be fine sacrificing for value, and Nezumi Informant should be premium. There is also a steel card that should be fantastic in this deck, Furnace Rains. Next is red-green battles. The signpost uncommon is Rampaging Geoderm. For 2 red-green, we get a 3/3 Dinosaur Beast with Trample and Haste. Whenever you attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. If it's attacking a battle, put a +1/+1 counter on it instead. Play battles like Invasion of Urgamon and Invasion of Regatha, then use cards like War Train Slasher and Thrashing Frontliner to defeat them and generate value. Portent Tracker should be a powerful common for this deck, ramping out your threats early and removing counters from battles later in the game. The next 3 archetypes spread across the Abzan colors green, white, and black. These colors have a lot of overlap, and many of the cards play well in multiple decks. Let's go over them now. For green-white +1/+1 counters, the signpost uncommon is Botanical Brawler. For green-white, we get a 0/0 Elemental Warrior, has Trample, enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on another permanent you control, if it's the first time +1/+1 counters have been put on that permanent this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Botanical Brawler. Play the backup creatures like Sigiled Sentinel and Chomping Kavu to generate +1/+1 counters, and then use Kami of Whispered Hopes to turn them into even more counters. And although it's a solid combat trick in any white deck, Angelic Intervention should be quite strong here. Next is white-black Phyrexian Tribal. This deck's signpost uncommon is Sculpted Perfection. For 2 white-black, we get an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, incubate 2. Phyrexians you control get +1/+1. There are some other powerful uncommons for this deck, like Norn's Inquisitor and Phyrexian Censor. At common, this deck touches the +1/+1 counter synergies in white, plus the incubate stuff in black. A common for this deck I'm particularly excited to try is Attentive Skywarden that can help you flip a battle and transform your incubate token. And of course, it's also a Phyrexian. Last in our trifecta of Abzan color pairs is black-green incubate midrange. The signpost uncommon is Elvish Vatkeeper. For 1 black-green, we get a 3/3 Phyrexian Elf. When Elvish Vatkeeper enters the battlefield, incubate 2. Pay 5, transform target incubator token you control, double the number of +1/+1 counters on it. This deck pulls synergies from both +1/+1 counters and incubate stuff present in both black and green, like Traumatic Revelation and Tangled Skyline. My bet is this will be a slower deck on average, so make sure you're building your deck to get to the late game, giving you time to transform all of your incubate tokens. Looking through the set list, this deck is pretty low on synergy, as there aren't really any incubate payoffs outside of the Vatkeeper. And since the incubate tokens are pretty mana hungry, ramp will be good here, including Blighted Burgeoning and Portent Tracker. Next, the red-white aggro deck for this set uses the new mechanic Backup. Make sure your curve is low to the ground with creatures like Enduring Bondwarden and Trailblazing Historian. Then grow them and push them through your opponent's blockers with backup cards like Bola Slinger and Fearless Scald. Alabaster Host Sanctifier should be a premium target for backup thanks to lifelink. Then of course, the deck just goes off when you have the signpost uncommon in play, Mirror Shield Hoplite. For red-white, we get a 2/2 Human Soldier with Vigilance. Whenever a creature you control becomes the target of a backup ability, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. This ability triggers only once each turn. And finally, we have blue-green Transform. This deck wants to get to the late game and then get value from battles, especially Invasion of Pyrulia and Invasion of Zendikar, and transforming creatures like Herbology Instructor and Notvolt Hermit. dig for your double-face cards with Overgrown Pest, and finish off your opponent with the Signpost uncommon for this deck, Mutagen Connoisseur. For 1 green-blue, we get an 0/5 Vidalcan Mutant with Flying and Vigilance. It gets +1/+0 for each transformed permanent you control. And don't be afraid to play off-color battles and transform creatures thanks to the fixing from Blighted Burgeoning, Skittering Surveyor, and the common dual lands. Now that we know the decks, let's get ready for your first few matches of March of the Machine by taking a look at the most common combat tricks you should expect to see from your opponents. I'm going to flash a mana cost on screen and you have to guess what combat trick your opponent is representing. If you've seen some of these before, feel free to pause the video if you'd like to challenge yourself. Here we go. 1 and a white. Angelic Intervention. Target creature or planeswalker you control gains protection from colorless or from the color of your choice until end of turn. If it's a creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. 1 and a blue. Jalfiran Shapecraft. Target creature has base power and toughness 4/3 until end of turn. Draw a card. Black. Mirrodin Avenged. Destroy target creature that was dealt damage this turn. Draw a card. Red. Coming in hot. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn. Scry 1. Green. Arachnoid Adaptation. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains reach until end of turn. Untap it. So these aren't all of the instants from March of the Machine, but I've left a link to a Scryfall page of every instant in the set down in the description if you'd like to take a look. If you found this useful, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe for future draft strategy videos just like this one. We'll see you next time.